Hi, this is Karan from San Francisco.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles, and welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We are two longtime friends who grew on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies. So, Karan, why don't you tell our listeners what the topic is today?
All right. So, we're recording this a week before the Oscars. So
That's
I don't
right,
know
Oscar season.
I know it's coming up. So
Yeah.
I don't know if folks remember from last year, but in this week last year as well, we picked one of the Oscar categories and talked through that. And that was the category of scores. So this time around, we've picked the category of acting. So this episode essentially is movies that shaped our admiration of film acting. So that's what we'll be getting into. And I'm very curious to hear, Alex, what are your thoughts on, this key, at least in my mind, aspect of film, which is acting. But, for me personally, and I think I mentioned this on the pod before, and you obviously know this, is that my way into the love of film was through acting and sort of the process of, what actors go through. And I don't know, I found that always a very magical and mystical, indescribable sort of thing, because you're essentially being somebody else, and as much as we know that film is a team sport, all these different aspects have to come together in perfect harmony.
Right.
It is a director's medium, so ultimately what ends up in the movie is on the director. At the same time, I just can't help but think that there's magic across the board, technical or otherwise, but
Right.
I still think that the act of being somebody else, not just outside in, but really inside out, where you're able to carry somebody else's thoughts and feelings, be that person in an absolute sense, but then also engage and interact with other people as this other person, and then react to them. And they're also being other people who they're not, their real selves.
Right.
I've already caught myself in a tongue twister, but that sort of tells it, that's why this has been so magical to me of how this happens. And you can have the perfect lighting, the perfect camera, the perfect lines, the perfect anything. But to me, this is the piece that, at least to me, makes film a superior medium, because this is the only thing that helps us as humans see ourselves in like a real flesh and blood way. You can read a great book and imagine, you can listen to a great piece of music, you can watch an art installation that has the same aspects of sound and light and camera and even direction. But what makes film set apart from all of that is this aspect of there being real people, being other real people, which is so insane to me that you can actually do that. So yeah, this is why, this has been a very interesting and treasured way into the world of movies for me. So I'm very excited to talk about what that's meant to me. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, no, this is it's interesting. Like, I feel like I've come at this the opposite way in terms of, for me, like I think the last piece of the typical like puzzle of all the different artists that make up a movie that I started having a real appreciation for was actually the art of acting. It was, I think, kind of the last thing to me that really clicked of like, oh, these are artists too. I think there's that famous line of, Hitchcock where he called like actors or cattle, and actually, and then he corrected himself. Well, actors aren't cattle. They should just be treated like cattle, and that, I think, as harsh as that sounds, like that was sort of as I was getting, more and more into film. That's kind of how I viewed actors. I didn't really think about that as a craft as much as I did, directing, editing, even some of the technical categories. So it was kind of the last piece to click in. So it's fun that like we kind of came at this from opposite sides, which I think might be reflected in, the films we talk about. But definitely now, like I can say that, performance is something that I really do pay attention to when I see films. There's actors that I follow not only because, they're stars, which is a different type of thing, right? A movie star is very different than an actor. And there are actors where, I'm like, wow, like he or she does such a great job in the movies that I've seen, that I'd see something just to see what their performance is like, even if I know the rest of the picture's probably going to be bad.
So how did you go about your list?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of these films that I'm going to be talking about are from around that time period, because I really did think back to, okay, like what were the things and the movies that I saw that really clicked in my head of, okay, well, these are, actors are artists, and that is something that moves me as well, along with the other pieces. So I thought back to three films for me that were key in that. Performance, it obviously, is going to be part of that. These performances to me really help unlock in me the appreciation for the art of film acting. So it actually wasn't very difficult to come up with these films, because it was something that I remember not really focusing much on it before. And then after this period of time when these three films came out, maybe within 5 or 6 years of each other, I was like, okay, I'm kind of on board on the train that you just really eloquently put it at the beginning of this conversation on what the art of acting can be. That would have not landed on me as well, before I saw these films. And now I'm like, definitely +1 in everything you said.
Interesting.
What
For
about
me,
you?
it was the opposite, because it was such a hard list to put
I
together.
bet. Yeah.
And you kind of witnessed some of that, because I changed my mind on various things.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I sort of landed on representing not just like critical movies, but also different styles of acting, because
Mm,
there is no one style. And I'm not even talking about the movie star sort of thing,
right.
which, spoiler alert, could be a different episode on our
Yeah.
podcast
Maybe. Yeah.
in the future. But this is just like different styles of acting, and also different kinds of movies. Like, I wanted to pick different tones, because I think that's another key aspect of performance, that, depending on, this is where the director actor collaboration, I suppose, comes in. So
Hmm.
I wanted to have some diversity in that sense as well. So yeah, very excited to get into it.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what is your number three?
Yeah. I will kick this off with a film from 2008, Step Brothers, a comedy directed by Adam McKay, starring Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly, Richard Jenkins, Mary Steenburgen, and Adam Scott. And the IMDb plot summary is: two aimless middle-aged losers still living at home are forced against their will to become roommates when their parents marry. And
Great description.
it actually is a very good
Yeah.
good IMDb plot summary right there. So this one I chose as the movie to me, because, as I was saying, it took me a long time to kind of appreciate acting. One of the first types of acting, or types of roles, that I really understood the genius that an individual performer can bring is in comedies. I felt first, and I actually kind of still feel this way now, that comedy performances are a lot harder, and it's a
Sure.
lot more on the shoulders of the actor, right? Like, you can give me a very funny script and I can perform it terribly and the jokes won't land.
Yeah.
You can give, for example, Will Ferrell horrible material, but he will find something in that to make me laugh and get a performance across. So I do feel that, comedy acting was something that I first was recognizing as an art form, and this movie in particular really, I think, is so much so in the performances. Like, as the plot summary described, essentially Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly are playing like 40-year-old men
Mm-hmm.
who are actually acting like 10-year-old boys.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a big situation,
No.
where, it's a boy in a man's body. But these they're acting like kids, but you also have to sell over the fact that they're 40-year-olds. Is this a movie you'd seen before, by the way? I'm just
Oh yeah, no, this is, I don't remember when the first time I saw it, but this has been in one of those in the rotation kind of
mhm.
movies.
Yeah.
Always loved it. This might be one of my favorite Adam McKay movies, and
Yes.
probably one of
Yeah.
my favorite of Will Ferrell's as well, to be honest.
I think so too. Yeah. And do you kind of understand what I'm saying too about comedy? Like, do you feel comedy
Yeah.
acting is something that is also very difficult and really is on the
Oh yeah,
performance?
I totally agree. I think comedy acting is difficult for all the reasons you said. I will say though that there's a bit of a nuance here of like delivering lines really well and making it really, really funny
Hmm.
in the moment. That is one kind of good comedy acting. But I think, to me, the harder thing to pull off is that not only do you make the lines funny, but you actually make the character you're playing a flesh and blood person, where you
Exactly.
see.
Yes. Yes.
And that to me is the difference between, say, Adam Sandler movies, where it can be a lot of lines delivered really well and you
Hmm.
laugh. But for me, for it to be a true performance, it has to kind of ring, true that this
Exactly.
person is a flesh and blood three-dimensional person.
Hmm.
There is, I don't want to overuse the word arc because, life always doesn't have an arc. And in my mind, characters in movies don't necessarily need to have an arc
Hmm.
either
Hmm.
for it to be compelling or interesting. But you have to be along the ride with them and believe.
Right.
And so it has to, that's why it's a high wire act in that sense, because you're
Hmm.
making the material sell, but you're also communicating and conveying a full real person. And
Definitely.
these two totally do that, I think, in this movie.
Definitely. And that's why I really wanted to pick this one,
Yeah.
especially even compared to the other. I mean, I'm a big Will Ferrell fan. He's done a lot of different works. But in this one, I think the job of trying to sell, like the scene when the parents are announcing they're actually getting divorced and Will Ferrell starts crying just like a little boy would. And then John C. Reilly's like, is it our fault? Like you would
I
expect a
know.
kid to do, right? But they're playing adults and you buy both, that these are immature guys but they're still adults and they have all these responsibilities. It's a really tough thing to pull off. And you do see the evolution of these characters too throughout this picture. And they finally go off on their own and they learn to be responsible adults without losing that sense of sense of kid at the end, which actually brings me to another point too, that I think this movie, another reason why I chose it and why I also think comedy is so important, is you touched on this a little bit too, that the actors have to work off one another in a scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel with comedy even more so. And
Oh
in this
yeah.
particular film, which was shot during the writer's strike that happened
Mm,
in that time period, they had to do a lot of improv for that
yeah.
reason. I mean, Adam McKay does a lot of improv anyway,
Right.
but even more so because of the situation this was shot under. And I think that really does show the power of this actor, of they're really inhabiting this person so much that they don't have to listen to what the writer wants them to say. They
Right.
know that character and they can say it. Like that whole sequence at the end of the film when Richard Jenkins gives that inspirational, like, I used to be a dinosaur and I thought I could walk around and have to put away my like dinosaur ways. That was all improv. That was all Richard Jenkins. Adam
Amazing.
McKay's like, just tell a story about how you wanted to be a dinosaur at one point. And he came up with that entire thing. And that's a moment in the movie that I really like and find is very
Yeah.
funny, but also kind of touching. But you can tell it comes from this father and it's adding character in here. And that was all Richard Jenkins. So it's all performance, it's all the actor. And I think improv is something that, yes, it happens in other types of films, not just comedies, but I think comedy, it's a lot more improv friendly, I should say, which makes
Yeah.
it in a way a little bit more of an actor's medium sometimes too, because they can really put a lot of themselves into it as well.
I totally agree. But this again, it's the actors, but also credit to Adam McKay that
Yes, yes.
all of those things that you said can be true, but sometimes that can just go off on a tangent
Mm-hmm.
that I then sort of lose interest. I'm like, oh, this is just somebody having a great time, on
Right,
stage
right.
and just sort of going off of it. And that's fine and fun to a point. But I think the beauty of this movie is that it's all reined in and
Yes,
it all
yes.
feels true. Everybody is, like you said, playing off of each other. Nobody is kind of just hogging the entire scenery, because that's also very easy to do when you're
Mm-hmm.
improving and just, getting those laughs on.
Right.
That's all you're doing then. I'm like, no, you're not in a movie. Go to a stage and perform your one act, thing over there. So
Exactly.
there's a lot of that stuff that's happening here. I mean, I would also say, to me, actually, the MVP of the movie, actually, to me, is John C.
I
Reilly.
was gonna bring him up. Yeah,
Even
exactly.
funnier. And there's something very sad and vulnerable about him in this movie. And
Mm-hmm.
and John C. Reilly, in general, is a better actor, I think, because he can
Yes.
bring a lot more dimensionality to his
Mm-hmm.
performances, and that really shows over here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the parents,
Oh
both
my
of them,
God.
this movie
Yeah.
totally falls apart. Actually, they are the ones who are bringing it all down, grounding it.
Mm-hmm.
The central conflict, the plot obviously revolves around them too. They are kind of the key agents of change, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But they also ground the entire craziness of the movie. So yeah, love those two.
No, definitely. It's a great call out to Jenkins and Steenburgen.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think John C. Reilly really has the pathos to make you like
Yeah.
again believe that this character can act this way, drinking some sort of like blue soda and eating like dino nuggets, even though he's like 45. But you don't like feel like he's pathetic. It's not like a pathetic like man. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a very interesting line that he walks. And some
Mm-hmm.
great, one of my favorite moments of comedy, I guess, in the film is when they've already been like moved out, and he's there doing his like taxes in his Chewbacca mask, but he like takes the mask off and just pause it and like looks at it and then sort of like accepts the fact that he has to put silly things aside, and he puts it down and then he keeps working on his tax. Like that little moment right there, I don't know if it's improv or whatever, but the acting that he puts into that really makes you believe his entire character arc in like one scene.
Yeah.
Just brilliant. But yeah, I also second the fact that this is one of my favorite movies. I think maybe the best comedy of the last 20 years. Anchorman might be the only one that I'd put potentially in that contention. So I really wanted to make sure highlighting in at least my list, comedic actors, because that was again the first sort of form of that I really got into.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think my favorite montage from this movie, or I guess scene selection, is the interview montage.
Oh
It's
my God,
just
brilliant! Yeah,
unbelievable.
so brilliant. Yeah, yeah. I love this film. One day they have a real Catalina wine mixer now that they do every year in June, and
Oh
I want to
yeah,
go at some point. Yeah, yeah.
that would
Which
be
yeah,
amazing.
another one of my favorite parts of the film too is the Billy Joel cover band.
Right.
Where they're like, "Oh, we only do '80s Joel, sir." And so I don't know, it just gets me every time.
I
Um,
agree.
okay, moving on to your list. Where are you taking us after the Catalina wine mixer?
All right. So I'm taking us way, way back in time.
Okay,
So my number three is a film called Double Indemnity from
oh,
1944,
nice.
directed by Billy Wilder, starring Barbara Stanwyck, Fred McMurray, Edward G. Robinson. Quick logline: a Los Angeles insurance representative lets an alluring housewife seduce him into a scheme of insurance fraud and murder that arouses the suspicion of his colleague, an insurance investigator. Um, had you watched this movie before?
Yes, yeah. Billy
Okay.
Wilder's one of my favorite directors, and
Yeah.
this, yeah, I love this film. I'd seen it in high school, I think, the first time when I was
Oh
kind of
wow.
going through his filmography. But it's
Oh
great,
wow.
great film.
Yeah. So, this is like back in what I want to say the mid 2010s
Hmm.
or early 2010s, I should say, when I was sort of really having my moment with movies and getting into the history of movies, watching a ton of movies. One of my ways into that world was movies from the 40s and kind of really, following the careers, at least from the 40s to 50s, of some of these noteworthy people, starting
Hmm.
with actresses, but then actors as well. So, Betty Davis and Crawford and Katharine Hepburn.
Nice.
And then I somehow got to Barbara Stanwyck. I don't know how. Maybe it was through this movie, and just was totally blown away by this performer who I'd honestly not really heard of, because you hear Betty
Right, right.
Davis and Hepburn and such, who are iconic and legends, and I was kind of shocked and surprised by Barbara Stanwyck, and since then she's sort of been one of my favorite actors of that time. I think she
Oh.
brings this kind of gumption and kind of sassiness and cleverness and such that Betty Davis has as well, but it's a lot more tongue in cheek, as compared to Betty Davis, who can be very blunt and
Hmm.
abrasive often, and takes on parts that are like that. Barbara Stanwyck also takes on parts that are very, very unlikable, but there's always a bit of a, I don't know, a sparkliness in her eye or something that kind of shifts the tone of the movie and her part. So this is why I really wanted one of her movies on the list. I could honestly have put any of Betty Davis's or Sunset Boulevard or any of
Oh
those
man,
movies
yeah.
in this bracket, but I wanted somebody from that era, because it is a very different kind of acting style, right? Like if you look at the
Hmm.
classic movies, a lot of these actors are playing a heightened version of their own kind of on-screen persona for a lot of them. I mean, walking in what a Hepburn movie, what a Spencer Tracy Hepburn movie, or what a Betty Davis movie is going to be. It's going to shock you, slap you,
Right.
what have you, right? Like, so everybody's playing a version of them, not of themselves, but of their screen personas. Who the hell knows what these people were in real life? Because these were larger than life, godlike figures who just, graced the the earth we walk on Oscar
Right.
night or on the movie pages, right? Like we
Right.
didn't have access to their lives a whole bunch at that time, as I see it.
Right.
So yeah, I wanted something represented of that style of acting, which is a little bit overblown and over the top, but I think it is the genius, of course, of Billy Wilder, but then performers like Stanwyck and others in this movie that you are along for the ride. There's
Mm-hmm.
truth despite the histrionics in this kind of style of acting, which is why I'm drawn to it. Like this movie is about very unlikable, desperate people that's
Mm-hmm.
exploring, the ugliness that we all carry in ourselves,
Yes.
especially
No.
Stanwyck and Fred, right?
Right.
So
Right. No heroes in this one.
no heroes in this one,
Yeah.
and that's what it's exploring. But I think where the performances come in is that you're still rooting for them in some way, even though they're doing something very terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But and there's not much exposition granted as to why they are the way they are, why they're making the choices that they are. But there is something about the vulnerability, and this is sort of the inside out kind of pain, if you will, that you're along for the ride.
Yeah, well, I have one question actually to what you were saying. I'm just curious. I can't answer this myself as I try to
Yeah.
ask it. Like, I think a lot of the vulnerability and the fact that you're still rooting for these characters is because you have knowledge of their performances outside of the film. You like them as stars, right?
Mm,
Do you think if you had seen, I mean, maybe I'll ask this too. Did you seen this movie as your first Barbara Stanwyck, first Fred McMurray? Like, do you think
mhm,
it's their performance or their persona that kind of helps you? Because I do feel bad for these characters, even though they're
mhm,
terrible people.
mhm.
Um, do you know, like, do you think that's the performance or their persona, or is that kind of hard to tease out? I don't think I can tease it out for myself. I just was curious.
Yeah, good question. I mean, I honestly had not seen anything of theirs, so didn't really have much of a sense. So for me, I think it was the performance. This is why representing humanity on screen is such a amorphous sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really put my finger on it. I mean, I could throw a bunch of adjectives out there as to why it is the way it is, but there is something about their performances, the vulnerability comes through, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what makes us root for them. You see their desperation, and you, even though we ourselves may not have made those choices specifically, we've definitely shared the desperation and vulnerability where you're
Right.
trapped in something that you sort of knew is not going to work. You did it anyway, and now you're trapped in it.
Mm.
That feeling is not an alien feeling. We all know that feeling. And I think the
Right.
performances deliver that. Um, I also love that at some point, this movie really becomes a bit of a not in a sexual way for sure, but it becomes a bit of a love story between Robinson's and Fred McMurray's character, uh the cat and mouse that they have going on.
Right.
And the more I watch this movie over and over again, there's so many questions and layers between layers of like, who knows what, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know how much of this is the audience bringing, oneself to it, but it's a very layered movie. You can just take it on the surface of the movie and just enjoy the plot and what these people are up to. But if you go back and watch it, you start to see like really subtle things on the actors' faces that kind of make you think, did you already know this?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of that's sort of beneath the surface stuff that's constantly at play. I don't know if you caught that.
No, definitely. This is a film, like I said, I'd saw in when I was a teenager. I'd known Fred McMurray from the sitcom My Three Sons is like the
Oh
fun
yeah.
dad. So it was interesting to seeing him in another kind of more darker role.
Mm,
But for me, as again, someone who at this point especially wasn't paying attention to performances, this is the first film noir movie. And a lot of
mhm,
what Billy Wilder was doing with the mise en scène, the lighting,
mhm,
the camera angles, that is what I identify
mm,
with this movie and why I love it so much. And in this rewatch, knowing that you were putting this forward as an acting, I paid for probably the first time, I think, very close attention to the acting
mm,
of Fred McMurray and Stanwyck. And I definitely caught the things that you're talking about. Like I think, I don't want to say distracted because the movie has a lot of different parts to it, but I was
right.
paying so much more attention and appreciating a lot of what Billy Wilder and the cinematographer, et cetera, was doing with this film because it was so groundbreaking in these techniques. that I skipped over the acting, and it was great to kind of go back this time and really look at the performances. And yeah, it is classical acting, like you said. And I think some people do find that as a barrier to like liking these films, which I understand. I've never really had that issue. I've been totally fine with this classical style, but it is very different and just very interesting to look at how they're using, you know, the pre kind of method acting, pre Marlon Brando acting style, but still giving the same amount of emotion and pathos that a Marlon Brando or a Pacino or De Niro would give 20 to 30 years later. It's still there. It's just expressed in different ways. And it was great to pay attention to that upon this rewatch.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. Like that whole introduction scene between the two of them.
Incredible.
Incredible.
I
Those
love
lines
that.
and the way they're delivered. And even though it's classical style of acting, the more I watch this movie, it sort of feels so effortless because they're not like underlining that kind of sexual innuendo filled back and forth that's happening. Is delivered actually very, very plainly. But what is at display is the looks and the glances and all of it, and that's the thing which then always makes me wonder that had these people perhaps even met before, because there is this sort of weird otherworldly connection that's going on between them, or has she been on this hunt for a while that somebody like this has walked in before, and she's kind of perfected, at least in her mind, what is the criteria of the person that she's going to go at to kind of make them an accomplice. So
to the murder of her husband, right? Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that was definitely true, like you're saying, is the sexual chemistry and tension between those two actors, especially in that scene. It's just amazing what they can get across in how they're, the lines aren't, it's not really, it's between the lines, and it's even kind of like between the performances, like you said too. It's not very overtly, sexual, but you definitely feel that when you're watching that scene of like that there's that connection and that heat between those two people, and it's down to their performances.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes, not even that, actually.
Exactly.
And that's brilliance. All right. What is your number two?
So my number two film is from 2001, and it's Mulholland Drive, written and directed by David Lynch, starring Naomi Watts, Laura Herring, and Justin Theroux. So the IMDb plot summary: after a car wreck on the winding Mulholland Drive turns a woman into an amnesiac, she and a perky Hollywood hopeful search for clues and answers across Los Angeles in a twisting venture beyond dreams and reality. I put this movie on my list because I was thinking back to the moment that I really was like, wow, acting is an art form. And it goes back to this movie and Naomi Watts' performance. Like very clearly eye-opening thing for me in this film when I saw this in theaters, like in college. And I was like, oh my gosh, like actors can do this. I don't know, something about her performance here clicked. And before I get into too many details about like what it was and what still speaks to me today, like have you seen this movie? Had you seen it before?
Maybe bits and pieces. It's one of those sort of shameful to admit blind spots, because this movie is so iconic, which I had avoided. So it was fun to finally watch it in its entirety in preparation for this episode.
Are you a David Lynch a film? Okay, got it.
That's
he was a filmmaker that I was obsessed with in high school. So this movie came out in theaters and I went and saw it, and really, like, it was some Naomi Watts' performance. And the thing about this film that is also so brilliant, I mean, I think this is one of the best films of this century easily, is that it starts out and it's very cheesy and kind of soap opera-y, and Naomi Watts' performance is very naive. And she's this actress who's coming in from Canada and come to Hollywood, and she's very optimistic and really perky, like the plot summary said. All that comes through in her performance. Seems like she's in a soap opera, and it's like, okay, nothing that interesting or unique here. I kind of understand what this actress is doing. And Naomi Watts, this is the movie that made her too. Like I had never, I wouldn't know who she was before I saw this. And there's even a scene where she's rehearsing with her roommate. She wants to be an actress, so she's rehearsing a scene, and she gives a performance. It's like, okay, I can see this type of very wholesome, naive kind of person putting on a performance like this. Seems like an actress playing an actress. And then you finally get to the audition that she gives, And all of a sudden then it's like a completely different performance. Not only you're shocked that Naomi Watts is kind of giving this, because I again wasn't familiar with her as an actress, but this character, all of a sudden she's super sexual. It's very not very realistic acting. She starts crying in different parts of it. It's like completely transformative in a way that at least I didn't expect at all this character could ever be that good of an actress. Like, you think she just sort of someone who's going to get spit out by Hollywood because she's not really that talented. And then that one scene, it's this incredible transformation that Naomi Watts gives, that is, again, shocking to not only the people in the movie, but to me, at least as an audience member. I was like, oh my God, like, whoa, like, what just happened there? Like, how could somebody still believe? I believe that's the same character, but she's giving on a performance in that scene that I never thought the character could give. And then the movie totally changes directions in the final act when you realize that maybe the whole film has been a dream, and she has to play this version of the character that is very bitter, resentful, angry. Everything that she was trying to do in the first part of the movie that was the opposite of that. Like, she's not naive anymore. Like, she's kind of been through some stuff in Hollywood to turn her into a much more bitter, failed actress, I guess I should say, instead of aspiring. And the fact that she's able to give so many different performances in one movie, I think, is what to me was like, whoa, like, first of all, who is this actress? I've never seen anything like this before in screen. And then also made me really be like, wow, like, acting is something I should be paying more attention to. This really was like a light bulb moment for me when I saw this film. That. Yeah, how did you react to? We'll just start with her performance, and I'd love your thoughts on the other performances in the film too, because I think Laura Herring does an incredible job too. But on Naomi, like, how was? I guess coming to this now, you know who she was.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'll just say it out. First, I'm not a huge Naomi Watts fan.
No,
I like her.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
There's always been something about what I said up top about the inside outness of a performance that I've always felt missing. That technically the skills are there, and on the surface, or even maybe an inch below the surface, the stuff is there, but to me, it's never kind of seeped in the bones and the blood. Is if that makes sense. So
yeah, no, totally.
So I came with, I guess, a little bit of that bias, and I would say I was pretty wowed by it, and part of it was that I'd heard so much that this is sort of her, greatest performance and such. So I totally agree with what you're saying, that she is playing multiple characters, and you really get to see a lot of skill at display. That said, though, and again, I don't know how much of this is Naomi Watts and how much of this is even David Lynch, who I haven't seen that many movies of. I mean, this is clearly a David Lynch showcase. The movie is brilliant. Yeah. There is no question about that. And again, like a lot of, auteur directors, it comes down to how interested are they in their actors and their process and such. But what I felt a little bit missing was that exact thing, is that I was looking to hold on to some sort of connecting thread between all these different people that she's playing.
Oh, okay.
Who are the same person, actually,
Right, probably. Yeah. I mean, the movie is up to a lot of interpretation, but yeah,
right.
Probably.
But in one interpretation, which is sort of the leading dominant interpretation, that's what it is. So I was looking for that. And once again, I sort of felt that in your inside out, in your bones sort of thing missing. And this could also be, Lynch's thing, because you don't get to the real world portrayal of who she is now until very, very long. And you only see a very little bit of that. And that part is also very heightened. So there isn't much room given for us to kind of really connect all the other, portrayals to that central present portrayal. So maybe that's what's missing. But I also think the movie is not interested in that. The movie is interested in other things about the dream quality and the plot of it and the magic of it and the horror of it and such. It's not really interested in the character either, to that degree. I think this movie, in a different director's hand, is a totally different character study. This is not a character study.
Right. No, this is not. Well, it is and it isn't. I think they're using her character to say a lot of a lot of other things about Hollywood and making
Yeah,
art in Los Angeles. And I mean, this movie has like
the main,
thousands of layers in it.
exactly. But yeah, she was very good, but I still was left, just wanting a little bit more, is what I would say.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'll say like this is definitely her best performance. I'm not like a Naomi Watts
Oh yeah, this is her best
fanatic,
for sure.
or I don't think she's like
Yeah.
the best actress to ever grace the
Yeah.
screen. This performance in this movie just hit me. I think again, it could have been the time
Right time
as
yeah.
well of like, whoa, like what, I didn't know that actors could do this, to be honest, until I saw this movie. And maybe it is also, or it is too. The film is. I'm a big David Lynch fan. I think this is his masterpiece, and
the movie is amazing.
I mean, I hadn't watched it in several years actually until watching it for this podcast, and it just still, like, holy moly, just blows me away. It just, the filmmaking in here, and just to think that this originally was a TV show that he did. It was a pilot that got rejected, and then they tacked the ending onto it, and they went back and they filmed basically the third act of the movie was all added in later, because it was just supposed to be a TV show.
Oh wow, I'm so glad that didn't happen, because this has to be a contained story, otherwise it loses its power, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Naomi Watts actually is even quoted as saying that she was more excited about the character once she got the third act was added in, and she could realize, oh, this is sort of what this person's trying to do. There's a lot more here than me just playing the young, like, naive ingenue who comes into town, because that's all that it was. It's just a pilot for a show originally. And when they canned it, Lynch is like, okay, well, now this is what I would have done, and he added all that stuff in there, and that even made Naomi Watts more excited about the project too.
That's great.
But yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies, and I think the one that helped me understand acting and talk about the rest of the stuff that I'm talking about.
Because you really are seeing that sort of thing of one person playing different people, in its entirety. So I can totally see that.
Okay, so that was my number 2. Why don't we move over to your number 2? What's your number 2?
This movie couldn't be more different.
Okay.
than Mulholland Drive. My number 2 is Before Sunset.
Oh, yes, very different.
Very different. 2004, directed by Richard Linklater, starring Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy. Quick logline: 9 years after Jesse and Celine first met, they encounter each other again on the French leg of Jesse's book tour. All right, so from slightly classical, slightly heightened style of acting, I wanted to put something on it that was just completely naturalistic. And I feel like this movie, and this series of movies, especially the first 2, was kind of my entry into that style of acting. And then I, looked into a lot of French New Wave stuff and such. So sort of interesting that how an American film kind of became my entry into that world. But I think, to me, this style of acting, especially these 2, to me, this is a representation of acting where these people are playing not just a version of their screen personas, but more so a version of who they are in real life. At least that's how it feels like. And of course, I don't know who these people are in real life, but after having listened to Ethan Hawke speak quite a bit through interviews and such, even though I realize that's also a kind of performance, but it feels like this is the closest it gets to who these people are. And to me, that's the brilliance of these performances. Because I think, just imagine, right? If I put a camera on, gave you a script or a bunch of lines, which maybe you helped write as well, but then said that you have to be kind of you. I think that's very difficult to do. It's almost in a way easier to sort of heighten things up and hide behind. I shouldn't say easy. That's difficult too, but in a way, this is even more mind-bendy to me, that you're playing a version of yourself, if you will, but in an imagined circumstance, and you're interacting and reacting with somebody with that level of intimacy. There's nothing else to hide behind. There are no other people in the movie, really. There are no other characters. It's just the 2 of you. There aren't heavy plot points to hang your hat onto. It's just conversation and you. And one of the things I hear actors talk a lot about is just presence. This to me is the true test of that, where these people, as they're walking around you're glued to the screen, just looking at every inch of muscle movement on their faces, body language, which means they have to be really, really present to react, as if it was real life. So yeah, but I don't know if you'd watched this movie before or no, and does that resonate or no?
Yeah, it definitely resonates, especially with the naturalistic acting style piece for sure. I had not seen this movie before. The first one actually I was introduced to on the podcast in
Yeah,
the
I
episode on
remember.
love. So if folks want to know my opinion on the first film, go back and listen to our love episode.
And you were
Um,
positive from what I remember.
I did. I
Yeah.
really liked it, and I like this one a lot too. In a way, maybe a little bit better because it was a little more
Mhm.
interesting because it was a sequel. The fact that it was a sequel actually made it more interesting. And I have not seen the third film in the franchise. Maybe it'll come up in another podcast episode, and we can discuss it. But no, I think this film was very interesting in that it was even more so in a weird way than the other one because there wasn't the gimmick of you just meet for the first time, which is a
Mm,
kind of a plot element. That this
mm,
movie is all just them. It's a real time conversation with two actors just talking for an hour and a half.
mhm.
And if they can't pull that off, then the whole movie doesn't work. And another thing
Totally.
too that I think they do a good job with as well is this is a very written movie. Like it is a movie that the screenplay is the star in the film in a way. It's not really about how they're composing the shots or a big action scene or a big plot scene. It's all about the dialogue. And certain movies that are like that, I find that it just comes too wordy or too like I can see sort of like the pages of the script as
Yeah.
I'm looking at the film. But this just feels like a natural conversation.
It's seamless.
It's totally seamless, and that is all down
It
to the
feels
two acting performance.
improvised.
It
In fact,
does. Yeah, it
they're
does.
often asked that, oh, so was there even a script? Did you just show up and just walk around and drink coffee and eat croissants? And they're like, no, this is like totally written out and
Right.
blocked.
Yeah, no, exactly. And knowing that and going into it, then it makes the work that they did in these performances even
Mhm.
that more interesting and effective because you're like, wow, like they had to go through memorizing all these lines, but making it seem like this is just a natural conversation. And so many long takes too
Mhm.
in this film. Then I'm like, wow, like they really had to make this feel natural for not just like a 2 minute scene or a 30-second kind of bit where they then get coverage. It's like, no, a lot of it's just two shot of the two of them walking. So it's even more pressure on them. But no, I felt that all the things you're saying too around realistic performances, like these do feel like the same people from the previous film, where they would be at in their lives,
That's the other thing.
how they would
Yeah.
interact with each other. And how it starts kind of awkward and they
Hmm.
want to say things but they're not like they don't immediately say, hey, are you with anyone? That doesn't
Hmm.
come up. That'd be like that was the first thing on my mind when I was watching. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, wait a second. Ethan Hawke does have a wedding ring on, but does she? And like, I'm trying to figure that out.
Hmm.
And you can tell that they are in their own heads as characters, not as the actors, obviously. They're trying to do that, but they don't want to just
Yeah.
kind of go right in and ask, like, oh, so I see you're married now. It's just a very natural evolution of conversation. Yes, that's the writing, but they also have to sell that as
Yeah.
actors.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, the point you made right before this, which is it's not only they're playing naturalistic versions or extensions of who they are, but it's also a continuation of somebody that they played a decade ago.
Right.
And
Right.
to kind of make that feel so seamless that you just put an old pair of jeans back on, that's just so effortless and so difficult. But yeah, I mean I've already said this on the podcast, but to me, this is as exciting as an epic blockbuster movie, even though the stakes are so low. But it's those little things about how they meet, the nervousness, the awkwardness, the flirtiness, the melancholy of what could life have been if I had taken this, and you as an audience are witnessing that oh, these people are so perfect for each other in so many ways, and if only life had kind of panned out a little bit differently. But
Mm-hmm.
then you also see maybe it wouldn't have worked, and so it's almost like you're walking with them. It's almost like when you're, yeah, it's such a kind of invitation in their lives, if you will, in such
Mm-hmm.
a deep personal way. So, and they sell it, and it's not just the lines, it's It's the look and the glances, the body language. Like you said before, the topic comes up about are you with somebody else? There's a lot of like growing physical touchiness
Mm-hmm.
between them, which would almost and but it's done in a very hesitant, awkward way. It's almost like you're doing it because you want it, because it's conjuring back old memories of what this could have been, but there are also real life things that are holding you back in
Right.
doing that. Like it's not a comfortable when she just he happens to sit on a bench and kind of pulls her and she sits in his lap, just kind of in the first 15-20 minutes. It's a very awkward moment actually, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not how to like two lovers would not be awkward like that, but they're not lovers yet, at that point in time.
Right.
And you feel that in their bodies, which is kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm. No, no, definitely. I mean, it's that the fact that there is, if they had, in the first film, they were just meeting, and there's an awkwardness there, right? Of like, I don't really know
Yeah.
who this person is, but now it's like awkward because of their baggage from the
Yep.
previous meeting, and that is even, I think, harder thing to pull off, to get that across in a performance, and I think they do a great job in it.
Yeah.
You really do see that you see that awkwardness, and of course there would be awkwardness. Like you
Yeah.
kind of get it because it is such a scenario that I could kind of picture myself in their shoes and be like, oh yeah, no, that would be totally awkward.
Yeah.
Definitely awkward, even though there's that desire to try to make it not be, but you can't avoid it at the same time.
Yeah. I totally agree. The last thing I'd say is, I mean, you said this earlier that, yeah, the screenplay is the star, and you did sort of save the performances, but I do want to give credit to Linklater as a director too, because it would be very easy to make this movie feel very pretentious in all
Mm-hmm.
the wrong ways,
Mm-hmm.
or not capture this very tender chemistry and interaction that's happening between the two of them, or get lost in the beauty of the place as well. But there's just so much restraint in that sense of how the camera moves. You see the back of their heads, you see the little glances, like it's so effortless, and that's why it sort of feels like, oh, this must be simple because there are no big set pieces. But actually, the relationship is the set piece, and
Right.
letting that shine and come through in a beautiful place like Paris, is to me, it is a feat of directing actually as well.
Oh, definitely. And the director has to trust the actors and vice
And
versa in
that,
scenarios like this, especially where it does all hinge on their performance. And there's not a lot Linklater can do, with where he puts the camera or in the editing per se that could cover up sort of if the chemistry's not there.
true.
But the whole movie hinges on that. Which obviously I think they knew there was going to be because there was in the previous film. So, I don't think it was as risky as per se that the first one in that sense. But no, you're totally right. I mean, you have to give credit to. I mean, I know this is an episode that we're supposed to be talking just about performances, but I'll say that yeah, the director does factor into these things as well, even if it's
For
just
sure.
letting the actor
Do
have the
that thing.
room to do something that they want to do instead of the conflict that definitely can happen between directors and actors all the time. I mean, again, to go back to Hitchcock, I mean, he was notoriously very difficult with his actors
Yeah.
because he felt that they were just pawns and things for him to control as opposed to artists that are
Moo.
giving performances in something that he's putting together. Um, to him they were no different than like the birds that are on set to in the birds. There's no difference between them. So um
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm glad you put this on the list. It was nice to see the second part in the trilogy, and curious on. And I thought they did a really good job with the second chapter, and curious on the third one.
Yeah, I guess I'll keep throwing these movies every year.
Yeah, maybe once a
So
year
kind
I
of
could.
keeping in line with the trajectory of the movie.
Yeah, that's fun. I like that idea.
All right, what is your number one?
So my number one film that to me really, sums up my appreciation for acting, or a performance that to me speaks to what acting means to me and what the actors can do to elevate a film is Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl.
Oh, Before Sunset on a Ship.
Yeah, exactly. There we
Great.
go. From 2003. Director Gore Verbinski, actors Johnny Depp, Jeffrey Rush, Orlando Bloom, and Keira Knightley. And the summary is blacksmith Will Turner teams up with eccentric pirate Captain Jack Sparrow to save his love, the governor's daughter, from Jack's former pirate allies who are now undead. If it wasn't probably obvious to listeners, the performance that really resonates with me and that I'll be talking about is Johnny Depp's performance as Jack Sparrow. And, to me, again, like I mentioned, it was around this time that I was starting to understand how actors can be artists and put into a film a major contribution just as much sometimes as a director or an editor. But I will say, when I was thinking back to putting together my list and thinking like who, when I was first getting into films, if someone were to say like who's a good actor, who would I say? And I would go to Depp. And this was because at the time, with me being a teenager, a lot of his movies were very, in rotation a lot amongst my age group. You got Edward Scissorhands, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Donnie Brasco, Sleepy Hollow. And he was different in each film. It wasn't like, again, I'm thinking back to like when I was a teenager, but yeah, okay, Tom Cruise, he gives the same performance in every movie. He's he's a movie star. Harrison Ford, also not a lot of range there. And I wasn't seeing yet at this time, like De Niro, Brando, Pacino, Meryl Streep. Like these were not movies I was watching. I knew about those actors, right? But Depp was the one who was in my face more. And I was seeing, wow, like Edward Scissorhands, like that's a totally different character than what he's doing in Donnie Brasco, which is totally different. So it was very obvious to me that an actor can really bring a lot of range, I guess, into a role. So I had to include a Depp performance then as my number one. And why this one I think is really so impactful on me especially is he really does make this film. And it's not just his performance, it's the fact that he created this character basically out of whole cloth himself. I mean, yes, the writers, there was some input in there too, but the vision that they had for what this character originally was going to be was very different than what Depp ended up putting on screen. And that was what made the movie work for me. I mean, the movie is actually, I think, very brilliant around Depp. It doesn't all just hinge on Depp. I think film's got a great script and great effects, and Jeffrey Rush is also good in it. But the fact that Johnny Depp, were thought that this is what to him a pirate would be. Apparently when he was figuring out his character after he gotten cast into this film, which at the time was a coup. Like he wasn't like a blockbuster actor. It's kind of hard to think back to this time before he sort of, I guess, ran his career into the ground, I will say, a little bit based on, his decision to go after blockbusters. Because of this movie. But he locked himself in a sauna for days to experience heat stroke, to think of like, what would that be like to be on a ship? He did a bunch of research in pirates and realized they were treated like rock stars. So he think, okay, well, I'll just model myself off of a rock star, and stole a bunch of mannerisms of Keith Richards. He came up with the idea for the braids, and he had this one concept that he wanted to have his nose fall off in every scene. And they were like, no, that's too far. So thank God they did that, because that sounds ridiculous. But these were his contributions. This wasn't just someone showing up to set. Okay, here's a script. Here's your costume. This is the director telling you and the writers, this is what the character is. Depp created that. And this was a very clear example to me, especially once I read more about the production history after I saw this film, of like, wow, like actors can do this. Like they can take something on a page that basically just the very cookie cutter, Errol Flynn type knockoff role, and transform this into, I think, one of the most well-known and famous characters in film in the last 20 years, out of whole cloth. Like that was Depp. And I think he created this franchise because of his performance. So to me, and I remember even seeing this film, when it came out, it was another one of the Disney, they had done Country Bears, and it's like, okay, another movie based on a theme park. This is going to be kind of dumb. I love Johnny Depp, but okay. And I even saw it like 4 days after it came out. It wasn't even opening night. And it was only because I heard it was that good. And I remember sitting in the theater with my roommate at the time, just being like bowled over by how incredible this movie was, and really like being like, wow, like Johnny Depp, like I didn't even think you had this in you. You brought all these great performances over the last 10 years, but where did this come from? This is so out of left field. And only I think a real actor, could bring that to the performance. So I had to settle for Depp, which, I know, again, his career has progressed in ways that I don't think he's a great actor anymore. And he's got a lot of other legal problems and financial problems, etc. But, this film was that important to me, in thinking back of like being like, wow, like an actor can be an equal part of the putting together the what makes the film, as a director, as a writer, etc.
And to do all of that in a blockbuster setup, which I think is even harder,
That's
right?
true.
Because there have been many collaborations where actors have come in and, kind of really, like you said, constructed or created a part and the entire movie out of not a lot. I mean, the last movie, for example, it's a true collaboration between Linklater,
Right.
Delpy, and Ethan Hawke, right? So they're involved in every aspect of the movie, but it's a much different scope and scale as opposed to a huge movie like Pirates, which has so much writing on it, the money and such. So yeah, to me, like I give you even more props to him that he was able to do that, and also props to the director to allow, I guess, him to do that
Right.
in the construct of a large, giant blockbuster movie, which are notorious for essentially swallowing performances. And this is almost the opposite, that the performance and the actor is driving everything else around them, which doesn't happen very often.
That's
And
true.
yeah, Depp, I don't have that kind of relationship with him the way you do, because I didn't watch a lot of his stuff growing up. So, I've seen stuff, before, or I would say more after. And
The Mordecai era. Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that.
I know. I haven't either. That was just a joke, though. But yeah, his later performances are not like his 90s stuff
No.
was.
But I guess after watching this and, going back and seeing Scissorhands and such, like to me, he's always been the guy with pounds and pounds of makeup. Like I actually can't remember a movie of his which has him playing like a normal human being, other than Ed Wood, which was so great to
Oh
watch.
my
You
God,
had
yeah.
on the list last year, I think. So I think I have some homework to do to really catch up with his filmography and appreciate him and his whole journey. But that aside, this movie is brilliant and he's great in it. I know you and we've talked about this off mic as well, about kind of how this movie came to be and such. So yeah, was happy to revisit it. It's such a fun ride, and he's great. And he's doing a lot of things, a lot of choices that are bold choices, but they're all rooted in character. I think that's the
Yes.
thing to
Right.
underline. Like it's not a vanity project. At least it wasn't back then. Over
Correct.
time, it kind of
Yes.
became that oh, I'm just
Definitely.
going to put these extra ticks on, or this extra makeup job, or whatever, regardless of who the person is, the character is. Here it sort of feels very true. It almost feels like what company of actors would put on this giant scale, which
Right. Right.
again is amazing. So yeah, happy to see on the list, and I was not surprised this would be a number one.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you do mention, right? Like the last film we talked about, before Sunset, did obviously the actors were very collaborative. To me, just as a college student, like I just wasn't like that. This was the movie to me that really changed my opinion on acting. As much as Mulholland Drive and as much as Step Brothers, like this is really the one in Depp's performance. So as weird as Depp is now, I still I still think he put some great performances in the beginning of his career.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's probably one in that pantheon of sort of movie star actors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
they're not
definitely.
that many in that, but he's in it, I think.
No, totally. I think that's a good distinction to make, whether he's both a movie star and
Yeah.
also a very good actor, right? He's not just playing up his persona and being in movies. And there's a big, art to that too. I'm not knocking movie stars. That's something we need too.
Yeah.
But to do both is something very rare. Okay, so then speaking of stars who do both and being very rare, why don't we move to your number one?
Shocker. Nobody's surprised who knows me or listen to this podcast at all. My number one is Sophie's Choice, from 1982, directed by Alan Pakula, starring Meryl Streep, Kevin Kline, Peter McNichol. Quick logline: Sophie is a survivor of Nazi concentration camps who has found a reason to live with Nathan, a sparkling, if unsteady American Jew obsessed with the Holocaust. This was a struggle for me because obviously I was going to have a Meryl movie on
Of
here.
course. Yeah,
There's
the,
no
the listeners would
question.
be disappointed if you didn't. I think they would unsubscribe. So
Exactly. I have to play to my crowds,
there you go.
to my streep heads.
That's right. Right.
But I actually didn't have this one originally. But the more I thought about it, like obviously this is not a movie that I put on a Thursday night or a Saturday night or any night. This is like it's a commitment
Definitely.
movie that you watch and you admire and you appreciate, and that's sort of that. But I think the thing that I kept coming back to was what I said up top, which is we've talked about all different styles of acting, but to me, the thing that I hold in the highest regard in the craft of acting is transforming yourself into a totally different person. And it's not just about physical transformation, though all those
Mm-hmm.
things are at present in full display here. Everything from the accent work to how she walks and the makeup and the voice, and you see her in different aspects of her life, and
Right.
all of that is happening, of course, but it's really more of the inside out performance where you can see this person thinking and feeling like somebody else. And there's a meta quality with Sophie as well, because she's lived so many different lives that
Right. Right.
as she's telling stories of her past, memory is a weird thing. You remember what you remember and you make up a lot of the other bits, right? So you're getting this kind of haunting, unreliable narration of the things that she's done, but there's also at some deep level maybe admittance to the things that she's done that she shouldn't have done, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And there are questionable choices there, and those live on because she's living with Nathan, who, spoiler alert, is revealed is kind of mentally unstable and such as the movie goes on, and you don't really know that, and you keep wondering why is she even with him, and
Right.
and then you realize that yeah, she's probably known that throughout this whole time. I mean, there's a famous line from the movie, which is that, I don't even know what the truth is after all the lies I've told.
Right. Right.
You see that in her eyes, in her body, and all of it. And that to me is what I was saying up top, that magical, mystical quality that this person has now crossed to a different plane in terms of what they're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, this is one of those, I don't know, pantheon greatest performance recorded on screen forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I have watched this movie a couple of times, and I'll get to in a second of what is revealed, not just about her, but the ensemble of the movie as well. Had you watched this movie before, and how did this movie land on you and her performance in particular?
Yeah, so I had seen this film for the first time, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, 17 years ago, something like that. And it was simply just like a, like I did it because I sought it out because it was like a box check thing of, yes, this is supposed to be one
Right.
of the best performances ever. I gotta see this. It's like you said, it's not an easy movie to just make time for. It's not that it's the fact that it's like really long or anything. It's just a
No.
very emotionally draining film, and I knew that would be that going into it. And so I'd seen it then, and this is the second time I watched it for the podcast. The first time I saw it, I mean, again, the performance even doesn't live up to the hype in the sense of it's even better than you might think. It really is. I would also categorize this amongst like the 5 best film performances I've ever seen, clearly. And I really like, I don't want to say like enjoyed the movie because that sounds like it's a fun movie, but I liked the movie a lot and appreciate the
Me
first
too.
time. The second time I saw it, which was for this podcast, actually, the film just really didn't work for me on every
Mm,
level except for her. I had a lot of issues with the story, and
yeah.
started sort of questioning like what is going, like why is this story that they're telling? But her performance actually became even, not because of the movie got degraded in quality in my eyes and her performance got lifted. It just, I was like kind of forgot how good it actually, my memory of her being that good wasn't even as good as she actually ended up being in the film. So it's just such an incredible performance.
Mhm.
Just yeah, it's magic in that sense. Like you don't know how an actress could do this, or an actor, right, could do this, but she does. I mean, you really believe that she went through all these things, and it's, yeah, the accent stuff, especially. Like I was paying close attention to that this time. I was like, wow, like she learned all this stuff with this accent too. Like how hard must that have been? And all the dialogue she does in Polish
And
and
German
German, it's
and
like she has to do all of this. So it's like the technical part of it is a feat in of itself, but the artistry she can bring too is just incredible. So
yeah,
incredible.
I it's almost sort of, I don't know. I'm left speechless often, of this performance in particular.
Yeah.
I'm with you on the movie. It is an odd movie, in many ways, and I'll be curious if you watched it a third time ever, how you feel, because I remember feeling this way after I watched it the first two times. I think I've seen it maybe three, four times now over the last several years, and I remember feeling sort of confused about the story and the movie. But this time that I watched it, I sort of felt like maybe that is the point, that this movie, like I was saying earlier, is a bit of an unreliable narrative from the point of view of Sophie, but also from the point of view of uh, Stinger's character. Because he's also writing a book and
Right,
talking
right.
about this and talking about this interesting, amazing, weird relationship that totally changes his life,
Hmm.
happens with this trio of people that they form. So maybe that is the point, that this movie is meant to be kind of this elusive, haunting
Mm.
sort of thing that you really can't wrap your head around. So when I started to think about it from that point of view, it's settled a lot better in my mind.
Mm.
And it's sort of, obviously she's amazing, but those other two also really come through. Because
Definitely,
Kevin
yeah.
Kline is like totally unhinged through
Yeah,
this
no,
movie.
it's great, and it's one of those performances because once you know the truth about this character,
Yeah.
the choices that he makes retroactively make sense, but they also
Mm-hmm.
made sense at the time. You're
Mm-hmm.
not like, oh, something's weird with this guy. You're like, oh, this is
Mm-hmm.
just, I know people like this. He's just
Yeah.
very kind of flighty and really full of life and all this stuff
Erratic.
and
Yeah.
erratic, and that's fine. And then when you realize that he actually, oh, wait, no, he's like mentally disturbed,
Yeah.
it's like another layer to that performance. So he does a fantastic job in the film as well.
Totally. And so
Um,
is Stingo, I think,
yeah,
because he
yeah,
has to
Peter
play
McNichol.
like
Yeah.
this interest. He's sort of the bystander. He's the audience surrogate, but
Mm-hmm.
he's also a critical part of this trio,
Mm-hmm.
which is such an interesting story device, right? Like the movie is set with the backdrop of obviously the Holocaust and everything, but in
Mm-hmm.
present time, it is really about this trio, and it's actually even quite funny at times and quite
Mm-hmm.
odd and weird of how they're getting to know each other and the adventures they go off on and such. So yeah, it's a loopy movie, I think, and maybe that's the point. Is my conclusion now?
Yeah, yeah. Again, like my issues with it this time were more about because it's based on a book.
Yeah.
So it's about the actual story itself and not really the machinations of the film. Just it's an odd choice making like a Holocaust movie, but not centering the victim on a Jewish person. She's not Jewish, and that's kind of the point of the
But
film.
I
And
love that
then
actually.
the fact that her guilt as a survivor is this it doesn't feel, I mean, maybe I got too hung up on the representation of the Holocaust and the survivors of that tragedy. It just seems like an odd story to tell using the Holocaust to do that if it just comes down to the choice that she has to make and being so heartbroken and about guilt and all these things. Like that was not representative of what that experience was like for the people going through it, right? They were victims.
Yeah.
Guilt, I don't think, factors into it as much as it does for Sophie's character. So just very odd, like story choices. Again, going back to the book, I'm not, the film obviously was adapting what they had, but I was starting to think like, this is just weird. Like, why did they have to make this about the Holocaust then? Couldn't this just be something, it's not even a Jewish person. It's nothing, it's not like she made it like that decision of choosing between her children was something that was part of that experience for everyone who went through that tragedy. Just those sort of things I thought were just kind of odd. I don't know why they just landed on me kind of odd. But again,
Mm.
that's the book. That's nothing to do with Meryl or Kevin Kline's performance
Mhm.
or Peter McNichol. I think they all are still totally brilliant. But I think it's kind of a weird story. But
To me, that is the point, actually. And I think that's why the movie has enduring power, because you can make movies about obviously the people who are actual victims, and there are. I
mm-hmm,
think there's something interesting about doing it this way, and it kind of contextualizes it. And this is why Sophie is not a hero of this
no,
movie
no, no,
at
yeah,
all.
right, yeah, right,
She's actually not. And I think that's the thing, that the suffering of other people and what really went on is heightened because of you're seeing it from her point of view, who is a pretty selfish person, even though she herself endures a lot and goes through a lot of
mm-hmm,
trouble for
mm-hmm.
sure. um and that's sort of the point, I think. So I kind of like that aspect,
No,
because
interesting.
it's a different way of telling the story. So I think, to me, the confusion that I was referring to is sort of more of the plot points, because there's just a lot of
Oh,
layers and
oh,
layers of like
mm-hmm.
what happened when. And I think my response to that was that that's also the point, because it's sort of this unreliable narrative thing happening from multiple characters' point of views. So kind of, yeah, now that I'm saying this out loud, and this conversation makes me feel land even more positive on this movie.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of felt that her performance is so historic and amazing that if that were removed, or if there was some other actor in the film, I find that I just don't imagine the film would have any kind of staying power or resonance at all. It really just comes down to that transformative performance that, again, like you watch it and you kind of forget how good it is. And it's just incredible. Definitely like in the top several performances put on screen for sure.
Yeah.
What are some things that didn't make it for you? I mean, is this just a long list of 20 other Meryl Streep movies, basically? I
know I did debate that. Then I was told that no, that would be a different episode, and nobody wants that. So
we could do a bonus Streep. We could walk the Streep or something.
Yeah. So I kind of, in my styles of acting that I mentioned, so I had Raging Bull, I had Taxi Driver, I had The Godfather, and kind of these transformative, The Verdict kind of category. And then I had a lot of film noir movies from that old time Betty Davis movies. So, Jezebel to Gone with the Wind to, and then in the naturalistic style, all the before movies, but then some of the French New Wave movies as well.
Oh, cool.
Oh, and Doubt, which is a contemporary movie, a Meryl movie that I really had a hard time leaving from the list because it has Philip Seymour Hoffman, Viola Davis, and Meryl, some of my favorite actors. What about you?
So I was thinking back to just other performances to me that really resonated. How I constructed my list, though, was sort of talked about the ones that first kind of awakened this in me. So the other films I had were Amadeus, Godfather 2, which I think Al Pacino's performance in that, I think, is the best performance put on screen. Raging Bull, and Taxi Driver, and then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as well.
Oh, also very good. Yeah.
Great. So as we get geared up now for this year's Oscars, we'll just remind folks that we'll have, much like we did last year, a bonus episode dropping right after the Oscars air, just to get our thoughts on the what the Academy did, the nominations, the awards, the show, and then also go over our top 3 movies of last year. So again, different from our 2022 movies episode, which was about movies that capture the feeling of the year. This is just the typical list of the 3 best films in each of our minds that came out in 2022. So hopefully folks will get that nice excitement of seeing the bonus episode drop in their feed a couple days after the Oscars. But after that, what's our next actual episode, Parad? Do you want to tease the listeners on that?
Oh, yeah. So I guess we're going into slightly somber territory. So our episode after hopefully the fun and joys of the Oscar, and hopefully no assaults on stage this time.
We'll see.
I mean, that's what it's come down to.
Yeah.
Our next episode is movies that shaped our feeling of loneliness.
Yep, a little more contemplative than
a little
this
bit
one,
more contemplative.
and harder to kind of get through those films, but it'll be a fun discussion. I feel that
I think so too. It's a pretty rich text, I think.
Definitely.
All right. Well, we'll see you all next time, and get those gold statues polished up until then.
That's right. And if you enjoyed the episode and you aren't yet following us on your podcast platform of choice, be sure to follow or subscribe. We'll be in your feed every 2 weeks.
All right. Bye.